Hello, this video is looking at the properties of our parallel lines, and we're looking at parallel lines that are cut by a transversal. So we kind of looked at some of these relationships last time, but now we're going to kind of further that and look at more of the properties that go along with it. The first one that we're going to look at is same side interior angles. So remember, interior means inside. So we're looking at in this space right here. And then the same side, we're talking about the same side of the transversal. This line right here is our transversal. It cuts through these other two lines. And this little symbol right here is just telling us that these lines are parallel. So when I look at the same side interiors, we're looking at like angles 4 and 5. Or we could be looking at angles 3 and 6. These angles are supplementary, meaning that they're going to add up to 180 degrees. And that's the relationship that we want to look at. The measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180 degrees. 4 and 5, when we add those together, equal 180 degrees. 3 and 6 will also do that as well. The measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 6 equals 180 degrees. That's one relationship that we're going to look at. Meaning is if I know angle 5, I can figure out angle 4 because I know that those two have to add up to 180 degrees. Keeping in the inside of our parallel lines, we have alternate interior angles. And remember, those are the ones that are across from each other. We're looking at like angles 4 and 6 and angles 3 and 5. And these are actually congruent or equal. So we would say the measure of angle 4 is congruent or equal to the measure of angle 6. If this is 75 degrees, this is 75 degrees. Same thing happens for measure of angle 3 is congruent to the measure of angle 5. Those are always the same. We talked a little bit about corresponding angles as well. Corresponding angles means that they're in the same position. As we look at this, again, kind of think of it as this intersection, angles 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then they kind of match angles 5, 6, 7, and 8. They look the same. So the corresponding angles are also congruent, which we talked about, but they are the ones, so like 1 and 5 are corresponding. They're in the same positions, and they are congruent. So the measure of angle 1 is congruent to the measure of angle 5. Angle 2 is corresponding to angle 6. The measure of angle 2 so is congruent to the measure of angle 6. The measure of angle 3 is congruent to the measure of angle 7. 3 and 7 are in the same spots. And finally, the measure of angle 4 corresponds to the measure of angle 8. Lastly, we're going to look at our alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior. Exterior means on the outside. So here's our two parallel lines. These are on the outside of those. And these, kind of like the interior angles, are also going to be congruent. So 1 and 7 and 2 and 8 are congruent. So the measure of angle 1 is congruent to the measure of angle 7. The measure of angle 2 is congruent to the measure of angle 8. We're going to use these relationships to help us find angle measures. And let's look at a couple of those examples. Here's our first one. We want to find all the angle measures. We're given one angle measure right here is 105 degrees. From that, we can find out all of the other relationships. Now, looking at this, we just talked about corresponding angles, and I see that this is now going to correspond with this. So the measure of angle 5 is going to be equal to the same thing as what this angle is, 105 degrees. We can also use some other relationships too. So if I know 5 is 105, remember we just talked about alternate interior angles. So then 5 and 3 are the same. And you can kind of see by their openings, they look the same. So the measure of angle 3 is also 105 degrees. And because measure of angle 3 corresponds to measure of angle 7, it's also going to be 105 degrees. So this is 105, this is 105, this is 105, this is 105. Now to find that other set, we can use either one of these, and we could use our, let's go off of the measure of angle 5. We know that this one is 105 degrees. We just talked about same side interior angles. So 5 and 4 are same side, and we know that those have to add up to 180. So if this is 105, the measure of angle 4 must be 75 degrees to equal 180. If this is 100 or 75, then because of corresponding, we'll do corresponding. Because of corresponding, the measure of angle 8 is also going to be 75 degrees. If 4 is 75, we then know angle 6 is also 75 because of alternate interior angles. And finally, the measure of angle 2 is also going to be 75 degrees because of, well, we could say numerous ways, because it corresponds to 6, which is 75. We could also, we didn't just talk about it, but we talked about it last time, vertical angles. So these are vertical angles. So this is 75, so that has to be 75. Those are congruent. There's multiple ways that we can do that. All right, what I'd like you to do is pause the video at this point, and I'm going to label all of these when you get back. And you should have the angles that are congruent here. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's check this over. So it says what angles are congruent to the labeled angle. So we want to find which angles are congruent to this. So we know that angle 5 is going to be congruent because of corresponding. You can write that. We know angle 3 is going to be, this could be because of vertical angles. It could also be because of alternate interior with 5. With angle 5. And then we could have alternate exterior with angle 7. So these are alternate exteriors. So these are the 3 additional angles that are going to be congruent to the measure of angle 65.